everyone, so I'm really excited to share this with you as I discovered probably one of the easiest ways that I have worked with a vector database so far in regards to finding the Elegance SDK. We're going to use it in order to build this memory app, okay? So an app that will essentially look through all my memories and find items that are the most similar to the input that we write. So for example, here you can see all my memories that I have in here. There's a lot. There's ones about me talking at Google and Microsoft. And we can type the word teaching, which obviously doesn't exist in the database, and it will return back the most similar memories to this word along with a similarity score. So we can find the most similar one. It does this thanks to the vector embedding database that we will be creating. But don't worry if this is too much information for you, as I'm going to be taking you through everything step by step. Okay, so as a recap, what we're going to cover in this course is working with a vector embeddings database that we will be creating in SingleStoreDB on their free tier. Next, we're actually going to build an app, okay? It's going to be a Next.js app that we're going to build. It's going to be so super simple thanks to the Elegance SDK that we'll be using. Now, this SDK is great, as I mentioned, because previously you might have seen me essentially take the word, so take the word teaching, turn that into a vector embedding, so we can then compare it to vector embeddings in the database. So then it returns back that specific item, that specific memory to us from the database word by word. And then we have to make another call to OpenAI, probably to make it more readable and friendly, like a chatbot would. So all those steps, which I would have done separately previously, are now done in one simple function, okay? So really exciting. This is the function. It does everything that I just said and returns back a fun, readable response. So let's do it. I'm super excited, okay? I'll take things super slow as we're going to be learning a lot today. Okay, so first off, let's start off on SingleStore. This is essentially we're going to hold all of our memories data. So we're going to create our database, our vector database to be precise. So we're going to create that in here. Okay, so first, please go ahead and select start for free or sign in like me if you already have an account. We're going to be using the free tier. You will get credits for this. Of course, if you do run out of credits, you will have to pay, but don't worry, we won't be going over that limit today. Okay, great. So yours might look a little bit different from mine because I am on the paid tier. You should see some credits, some free credits to use. Now, the first thing we are going to do is, of course, create a database. So first off, I'm just going to create a new group. I'm just going to keep it named group 1. That is fine. You can call it something if you wish. And then I'm going to keep the cloud providers AWS and the region the same. And I'm simply just going to go ahead and click next and create a workspace. So pretty easy. That's really it. We now have to wait for our workspace to essentially get deployed. So while that's doing its thing, I think it's okay for us to go ahead and start writing some Python script in order to take some data. Okay, we're going to take some data. It's going to be my memories, and we're going to create vector embeddings out of it. Now, if you don't know what vector embeddings are, I do have a great tutorial on this. Please click on the link in the video description below if it doesn't pop up right now. But for those of you who are already familiar with vector embeddings, I'm going to continue. So great, just go ahead and click develop here. And we're going to just create a new notebook. Don't worry if you don't know any Python at all. I'm going to take things super slow so that hopefully you get the idea. And again, the code will be available to you in the video description below. I'm going to go ahead and call this Semantic Search, just like that. It is going to be a blank notebook. So please go ahead and select the same and just click create. Now, wonderful. Before we get going, I just want to explain what's going to happen here. In this notebook, we will demonstrate an example of conducting semantic search on SingleStoreDB with SQL. So unlike traditional keyword-based search methods, semantic search algorithms take into account the relationship between words and their meanings, enabling them to deliver more accurate and relevant results, even when the search terms are vague or ambiguous. SingleStore's built-in parallelization and Intel SIMD-based vector processing takes care of the heavy lifting involved in processing the vector data, so it will make our lives super easy. And this will allow you to essentially run your machine learning algorithms right in here. So we're going to use OpenAI's embeddings API in order to create the embeddings for our data set. And we're going to run semantic search using .product vector matching as well. If that means nothing to you, don't worry. I'm going to take you through things step by step. So first off, well, I'm just going to write everything down in Markdown for you, as I think it might be a little bit easier. Step one was to create a workspace. So we have already done that. I can even write it here if we want. One, create a workspace in your workspace group. So that's what we did right here. That is done. I'm just going to leave some extra information for you here in case you want to do this later on. Step two is going to be to actually create the database itself. So create a database. We're going to call it semantic search. So semantic search. And we're going to do that from this notebook. So I'm just going to make this Markdown once more. And there we go. And in order to do that, well, we are going to use Python for this. So the little piece of Python code in order to create a database is just this. So we're checking if this is a shared tier first, and then we are going to drop the database if it exists, and then we are going to create that database. So let's run that. And then this just means that under databases here at the moment, it won't exist. And then once that is finished, semantic search will exist. Great. So that's it. Once again, I'm just going to leave some Markdown here for you so that you can come back to this later on. That is the action that is required. Now let's talk through it. So once we have created a database, we need to actually connect to it. So we do this from the drop down here, and making sure we are in workspace 1, I'm just going to select semantic search. So we have now done that. Let's go to step 3. So once again, I'm just going to put this as a Markdown, and let's do step 3, and that is install and import required libraries. So there we go. As mentioned, we will use the OpenAI embeddings API. So let's go ahead and do that, as well as these two. I have specified the version of OpenAI because, as we know, tech is ever changing. It's changing so quickly. So I just want to make sure that we're all using the same version of OpenAI, just in case you're watching this in the future and something is not working. So there we go. I'm just installing and importing those libraries. Make sure to check that Python is selected for that. Now let's go to step 4. So I'm just going to select Markdown here for you so you can see step 4. Create an OpenAI account and get API connection details. Okay, so this one should be easy for you if you've used OpenAI before. I'm just going to put in some text for you in order to help you out in the future. So let's go ahead and do it. So let's get our API key. I have put a link here so we can go straight to platform.openai.com/API keys. And then we just log in. I do already have an account, so this is easy for me. I'm just going to log into my OpenAI account so I can get my API key. Okay, so just head over to this URL as well, log in or sign up, and I'm just going to create a new key. Let's go ahead and call this memories, and I'm just going to keep everything as it is and create that secret key. So that's all I've done. I'm just going to copy it. Please take your own. I will be disabling this later on. Copy it because you're going to need it soon. Now, there is an action that we need to do. So I'm just going to paste it here for you so you can read it. So one thing we do need to do is essentially update our notebook's firewall settings to allow for OpenAI in order to get embeddings from OpenAI APIs. So this is pretty easy. Make sure this is saved. Look here. Include this right here in the firewall settings in order to get the embeddings from OpenAI APIs. Okay, just for the sake of this tutorial, what I'm going to do, well, I'm just going to allow all IPs. Essentially, let's go back to develop here, and then you're just going to go to the workspace. So here it is. You should see that has now been deployed, and under firewall, so I'm just going to allow access from anywhere and save just like so. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So I just allowed access from any IP just to make our lives easier. So now that we've done that, let's move on. So making sure Python is selected, I'm just going to copy this, paste it like so. This is the code that we're going to need in order to ingest our OpenAI API key. Hopefully you saved your API key, because I just want you to paste it. And that's all you're going to do, and just hit run. Amazing. Great. Now it's time to create a new table in our database called memories. So I'm just going to write that down in Markdown for you. So Markdown, and just paste this like so. Okay, so create a new table in your database called memories, and make sure Python is selected, or you could select SQL, but you know, I've kind of done that up here. We are going to delete a table, or get rid of a table, drop to be more precise, a table if it exists called memories. At the moment it doesn't, so we're fine. We're going to drop it and create a table called memories that takes a date memory, a memory title, a location, and a memory. And I've also specified the types that it takes. Okay? So I'm doing this based on something that already exists, but we'll talk you through that in a bit. Make sure yours is exactly the same as mine is here, and just run it. So if you have done that, you should see this show up here. It's essentially a table called memories that takes these columns. Wonderful. And now we're going to import our sample data. Okay, so amazing. I've already done this for you. This is a data set of memories from me. You can add that if you wish. So I'm just going to add it as a markdown here too. And using Python, I'm just going to define the URL. And I want you to essentially go to my GitHub account. So we're going to go to github.com/Anya, and in my repositories, you should see something called memories. So here we go. This is the file that we need. It looks like this, and we're going to get the raw version. So just go ahead and click on raw. These are my memories. We're going to insert into memories. So this is just SQL. We're going to insert into the memories table the date of the memory title, the location, and the memory. So you'll see here the date. You'll see here what the memory is called, so the memory title, the location of it, and the memory itself. So I got to see the latest SingleStore release, as well as meet other developers invited to the demo day. That's my memory right there. So all of these are my memories. I'm just going to get this URL like so, and then just paste it in like that, and I'm just going to hit run. Great. So all we've done is stored all of that under the URL variable. And now we're going to essentially, just going to select Markdown. We're going to use the SQL magic command to run a query against the currently selected database. So here is the code for that. It is with Python that you are doing this, and you're just going to hit run. So there we go. Now it's time to actually add vector embeddings for each memory. So once again, in Markdown, I'm just going to add this for you so you can read it and see what is going on. These are just little helpers for you. So what we're going to do, and this is a big piece of code this time, make sure Python is selected, and we're going to alter the table called memories to add the embeddings. So for this, we are going to use OpenAI, okay? We are using get embeddings from OpenAI. We are passing through the model that we're going to be using, which is text embedding ADA002. And for each memory in my table called memories, we are essentially going to pass that through the get embeddings function so we can get a vector embedding of it. So this is essentially what this code is doing. And if I run it, please take a moment to pause here, make sure it's exactly the same, or just take it from the code in my video description. So once that is done, we've essentially got the, well, let's have a look in here. I'm just going to make sure this is saved. In the tables, we've now created another column called embeddings, and we've essentially put in that embedding. So under sample data, here is my embedding created with OpenAI. That is important because you can't compare OpenAI embedding to another embedding created from another model, for example, and we've taken this memory and turned it basically into this, okay? It doesn't look like much, but this is essentially what's going to help us do a semantic search. So now that we've done that, let's actually run the semantic search algorithm with just one line of SQL. So I'm going to go back to develop, okay? And once again, I'm just going to get some markdown for you so you can use this as a cheat sheet. So there we go. And I'm just going to supply you with the code to bring out the 5 most similar items to your search term. How this works is, essentially we're going to write in a term here. So for example, I can write teaching. Okay, and this will look in my database for anything similar to teaching. This works because we are turning this into a vector embedding, and then we're going to look in our database, look through all the vector embeddings and compare which one has the most similar meaning to the word teaching and bring back the most 5 similar ones. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hit enter. And ta-da, it brings back the memory along with the similarity score of how similar teaching is to this memory. So we have number 1, the most similar memory that I have is this one. So we looked at my database and we're returning, as speaker at the Google Developer event in London, I was able to share my experiences in the field, and that is the most similar. And then we also have the 4 other similar ones too with a lower similarity score. So this looks good to me as speaker at the Google Developer event in London. That does exist here. So if you look in the sample data, as speaker at the Google event in London, there we go. That exists. That is the most similar according to my semantic search in terms of memories that exists in here. Great. So this is all working as it should. I'm really happy with this. I think that looks good. I think we're ready to go. Of course, this isn't, you'd probably want it to come back speaking like a human. So something like, oh, I looked at your memories and this one is the most similar one. We can do that. Okay, we could do that. We'll do that in the app. However, I just wanted to show you that this works. And if you've got to this space, great. If not, just I'm going to share this whole file with you. So you could just take it and put it in here if you prefer, if you're not getting something right. I really want you to get to this point and make sure it works. So take that file if something doesn't work for you. Otherwise, let's get to building the app. So let's do it. Before we go, I am just going to share some code with you just so that you're not constantly running this. So I'm going to show you a way to clean up. So we'll just put 9 clean up, okay, and then here is a little helper for you, and this is the code to run if you want to essentially drop the database, okay? So if you wanted to just kind of drop the database for the workspace. Cool. I'm not going to run that, so don't run yours either if you want to continue. So let's do it. Now that we have done that, like I said, we're going to move on to the app, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get my terminal up. Here is my terminal. I'm just going to make it super big for you. I'm just going to go to a directory that I like to store all my projects in. And we're going to create basically just like an empty Next.js project that has all the correct configuration that we're going to need in order to spin up an app for us, but also spin up an app for us that kind of gives you the configuration to work with single store databases. So the command I'm going to use is npx create SingleStoreDB-app --template elegance next. So this is a Next.js app, and I want to use the Elegance SDK in order to communicate with the single store DB. So that's what it is. There's a space here, there's a space here, there's a space here, and just hit enter. Okay, we're asked to install the following packages, so I'm just going to go ahead and select a yes. Let's call this Next.js Memories app and hit enter. I'm going to build my own app, so I'm going to select that. We're going to use Next.js, and there we go. Now that's doing its thing. So we'll just wait for that to finish. Okay, great. Now I'm just going to head over to WebStorm, which is my code editor of choice, and open this up. So I'm just going to open, and you will see Next.js Memories app. I'm going to open that up. And amazing. So here you have some instructions. Of course, feel free to read them. I'm going to continue. So based on your env sample, we're just going to fill out our .env file. So copy that, and then in your .env file, we have some information here already. I'm just going to get rid of that and paste this in like so we can start fresh. This will essentially allow you to connect to your single store database. So let's do it. So let's just go back to here, and you're going to get all this information you need from the group. So here, in order to connect to this, you can just select your app, and then this is the password. So you can generate a new one, or you could just copy this one. I'm just going to paste it in under password. Okay, great. And now we can continue. Here you'll see all the information to connect to your app. We're going to select this option right here. And then this is the information that we're going to need. So host, I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it under host, just like so. User, well, this is just admin, so go ahead and copy that. And then the port is going to be 3306. So let's just go ahead and post that under user, port 3306. And then we're going to put the database name, which we know is Semantic Search, as that's what we named our database. Okay, and then we're going to put in our OpenAI API key. So I'm going to get rid of this for now, as that's outside of the scope of this tutorial. And then let's paste in our OpenAI API key. So hopefully you've saved yours so it's easy for you to access, and just paste it in like that. Once again, I will be disabling this, so you won't be able to use mine. Please do use your own. So great, we are now done with the .env file that allow us to connect to our database. Let's move on. I'm going to get rid of that too. Now I'm just going to clean up everything that we don't need. So in the source directory under services, well, we're going to need these two. So this is what your elegant client.ts file looks like. I'm not going to change anything here. Well, apart from maybe get rid of the semicolons, as I'm not a real fan. So that's your elegant client. This is your elegant server client. Once again, I'm not going to change anything here. I might just get rid of some semicolons, but that is totally up to you. You can keep them if you wish. Okay, so we're going to leave that for now. Please don't change anything in these two files. Great. So the services we're going to leave as they are, and under app, now we're going to delete some stuff here because we want to start fresh. So if you click on page TSX, we're just going to delete everything that we don't need. So I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger for you so you can see. We're going to keep this. We're going to insert something else as well. We're going to define the next page. We're going to get rid of the import of the image because we don't need that. This page is going to be just so super simple. I'm going to also just get rid of the MySQL command. We'll keep the metadata for the website. Okay, let's maybe just call this memory app instead. So memory app, just like so. And the description, I'm just going to, well, let's just delete all of this and just write our own. So I'm going to delete all that just like so. And you can write in your own description. I'm simply just going to put an app that reminds you of your memories or finds similar ones. So that's all I'm going to do for the description, just like so. And let's continue. So we're going to get that metadata, and we're just going to pass it through this. I prefer function expression, so I'm just going to change this to const home, just like so. And we're just going to return one div for now. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this return. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to also just delete this card right here. So everything that should be in your file at the moment, const home, make that a function expression. Let's just return a simple div. There we go. Is essentially this. Okay, you're importing these two things from Next. You're defining a description. I've used backticks, but I don't really have to because we're not putting any code into here. And then we're exporting metadata for our app. We need to export this, so I'm just going to do export default home, just like so. And our home page, I'm actually going to also define the type of this as a next page. I've just imported that from Next. Our main page for now, I'm just going to put the words home so you can see it. Okay, so that is essentially everything in my app.tsx file. Make sure yours looks the same. And let's continue. So that's our page TS. Our layout essentially is going to be the layout of the app. We're going to keep that global CSS import. We're not going to bother importing any text. So let's get rid of that. I'm just going to keep this so super basic. Root layout, children. Let's maybe also import types that we're going to use from React. So I'm going to import React Node as well as React element from React, which just means that I can just do that instead. Okay? And this is actually a React element. Great. Because we're not using any fancy text or anything like that, I'm just going to get the body and pass through the children. Great. So this is looking good. That's the whole content of my layout.tsx file. Let's continue. The global CSS, well, I'm just going to start from scratch. I'm going to delete it as well. Let's keep the favicon, and under API, let's check out the roots that we have. And once again, I'm happy to keep this as it is. So that is the entire content of the roots.ts file. Make sure yours looks the same. Don't touch it if you don't want, or you can get rid of the semicolons like I am doing right now. Great. So make sure yours looks the same. I'm just going to try to get all of that in there for you. And let's move on. So now that we have that, yours should be exactly the same as mine. Let's go ahead and visit our app. So of course we are running it in here, so you can continue running it in here, or if you want, I'm just going to terminate this. You can do it from inside your terminal. Depends on whatever code editor you are using. Just make sure you are in the Next.js Memories app and just do npm run dev as per the package JSON. Okay? So if you want to have a look at the package JSON, maybe let's do that now. Here is the package JSON file. And it will just tell you all the versions that we are using today. So this is the version of SingleStore Elegance SDK we are using today. Make sure yours is the same if you're watching this in the future. And if it's not, so for example, if it's 1, just change it to 0, and then run npm I again to reinstall that package. And here are all the dependencies as well. Great. So let's continue. So now I'm just going to go ahead and visit. We can get rid of that here. Localhost 3000, and here is my app. At the moment, we just have a home page. This says home, so this is looking good. I'm just going to go inspect this so we can continue and get out my console log. Wonderful. So we should all be at the same point. I'm just going to minimize this. Let's get rid of the package JSON. We're not going to touch this roots.ts file, so that can go. We'll keep the global CSS, we'll keep the layout, and we'll keep the page TS file here. Great. First off, I think we should do a little bit of styling. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to style this up to look like an actual app that can take questions. So maybe let's go ahead and delete home here. I'm just going to move that here for you. It's going to be so super basic. Okay, we just want a working app. I'm going to give this the class name of app. And then let's create a div here. I'm going to give this the class name of app header. Just like so. And in the app header, we'll have a few things. We'll have one div that's going to hold our profile picture. So I'm going to go class name, profile picture, making sure to spell picture correctly. And I'm actually just going to put a little brain emoji. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. Let's create another div this time. I'm going to give this the class name of info container, and this is going to hold a little bit more information about this app. I'm going to put an H1 heading for Anya's memories, as that's what our app is going to do, essentially look through my memories, and then just a P element that says ask me anything. Okay, great. And that's really it. I'm going to now, right here, okay, because this essentially is our app header, I'm going to create a component called chat that's going to handle all of our chat. But for now, of course, that doesn't exist, so I'm going to comment that out. And let's start this up a little bit. So let's start picking things out, right? So here, well, first off, maybe let's select a font to give everything. I'm going to go with font family Trebuchet MS, and then as a backup, I have Arial and sans serif. Okay, now let's actually get the whole body of my app. I'm going to make sure that it takes with the whole height, so 100 VH, and the width 100 VH. Let's give it a background. It's going to be a linear gradient. So hopefully this is a nice refresher for those of you who haven't done CSS for a while. I'm going to make it white, 255, 255, 255, and 0. Actually, let's just make it 1 opacity. We can change that later on. And then the second color that we're going to do is a purple. So, I mean, you can do this on 2 lines if it's easier for you to read. So now let's do another color. I'm going to do RGBA 140, 69, 167, 100%. So great. At the moment, this will look like this. We actually don't need the 1 anymore because we decided not to make it transparent. So that's essentially exactly the same. Great. So let's move on. Now that we've done the color, I'm just going to initialize Flexbox, so display flex. And then I want to center everything from left to right, so I use justify content center. And if I want to align everything from top to bottom, I also do align item center, making sure that I have a height defined. So that is important. Great, now let's grab the element with the class name of app. And I'm just going to make this a very simple square or shape that has rounded edges. So let's just go back on color RGB. 244, 244, 244, just like so. I'm going to give it a border radius of 40 pixels. And then let's make the border, I'm going to go with solid 10 pixels. RGBA, so let's make it a bit transparent, 255, 255, 255, 0.183. Make sure to spell border correctly. Now I'm also just going to hard code the width to be 600 pixels, as well as the height, so width, height 600 pixels, just like so. Once again, I'm going to do display flex and then do flex direction column. So everything kind of stacks up on top of each other, and then justify content space between. Okay, so that the top item is spread out from the bottom one and the middle one too. So make sure yours is the same. Next, let's grab the app header, which is going to hold basically the wording, right? So I'm going to make sure this spans 100% of the parent element. Let's make the background color of this white RGBA 255, 255, 255. Once again, I'm going to initialize Flexbox to make everything go from right to left, and then have a padding of 20 pixels, as well as a border bottom. I'm going to do border bottom of 1 pixel, solid RGB. I've picked this out already. It's a kind of gray 191, 199, 191. Perfect. So at the moment, it will look like this. We need to do a few things. I need to make this go to the sides and also overflow hidden. So let's go back to the app. I'm going to do overflow hidden, just like so. And also background clip padding box. Great. So now let's move on. I'm going to also grab the H1 element and the P element. And what I'm going to do is just apply a padding of 1 pixels to both and a margin of 0 to overwrite any default styling that it has. And on top of that, so just on the H1 element, I'm also going to make the font size 23 pixels. Okay, so I'm just changing things up a little bit. Let's also grab the P element, and the P element, I want to have a certain color, which is the gray of 145, 145, 145. Wonderful. Nearly done. We're also going to grab the profile picture because at the moment it's really small. I just want to make it big. So I'm going to grab the profile picture just like that. I'm going to give it a width of 50 pixels. Let's give it a height of 50 pixels. I'm going to give it a border radius of 50% to make it a circle. I'm going to go with overflow hidden to hide anything outside of that circle. Let's change the background color to be a purple. So I'm going to go with RGB 140 69 167. Okay. I'm just going to space this out from the right, so margin right 10 pixels. I'm going to also change the size of it to be 35 pixels, as is an emoji, so that should work. I'm going to do display flex to center it, and once again, justify content center and align items center too. Cool, so that should look like that at the moment, and it's looking really cool. Okay, so I think that's it for now. Let's work on the chat next. So let's go back to the page and let's work on the chat component. So I'm going to actually create a directory called component. So just select app to make sure you're going to create it in the same place. And I'm going to call it components. And in here, I'm just going to create a new, that's right, it's a file. I'm going to call this chat tsx. Okay. And here is my chat. And I'm also going to create another one here. It's going to be to show each individual message. So on components, I'm just going to create another file. I'm going to call it message, tsx, as we're going to create a component for each individual message that comes back to us from our chat app. So great. In chat, let's minimize this for now. I'm going to const chat equals, so just like so. And of course, export default chat, and we'll just return something, right? So return, I'm just going to do empty element for now. And of course, we could just copy that for messages too. I'm just going to change this to message, an individual message, and export that also. Great. So now let's do the chat. So in here, once again, we're just going to style this up super quick. I'm going to have a div. This is going to essentially hold our messages. So class name messages container plural. And then we're going to map out messages onto a message component, which we are, of course, yet to create. And then we'll have another div here. Let's give this the class name of input container. So input container. So we have a messages container and an input container. And this is going to take the input. So let's create the input like so. I'll have an input and it'll also have a button that we're going to use to submit. So button as well. I've already found a little arrow to give it like that. If you're wondering where I got that from, I'm just going to search it for you. You can find it at this website right here. So here is the URL for that if you need. Cool. So yeah, great. Let's work on our input first. I'm just going to open that up. Let's have some placeholder text. This is going to be type your question here, ... 3 dots. Let's make this a little bit smaller. We'll make this disabled only if chat completion is loading. So we'll define that later on. And then on change of this, we want to save something to state. So on change of this, I'm going to do set value. And we're just going to save this to the state of this component, target value. Okay. Of course, we are going to have to import use state from React in order to do that so that we can save the value up here. So value set value equals use state. This will be a string. Okay, cool. We'll add types later on. So wonderful. We have done the input. Now let's do the button. Once again, this is going to have a class name. Let's just call it send. I'm also going to define the disable. So we want to disable it based on certain variables. And on click of this, well, we're just going to handle the click. So handle click. Great. So that is literally everything that is in my return right here. Please make sure yours is the same. Now, let's move on. We will, of course, write our handle click function. So const handle click. I'm going to just put that up here for now, just like so. And we will come back to that. This is going to be on the client. So I am going to have to put the string of use client here. Make sure you have the same. I'll just make it bigger for you. Great. So we will come back to this. I just want to style the input a little bit first, and then we'll get going with this. So let's go back here and let's continue. So let's maybe grab the input container first. I'm going to give it padding of 30 pixels. Position relative, as we're going to have to position a button within this input container. And now I'm just going to say that the input that lives inside this input container, just in case you want to add any other inputs later on, it's going to have a width of 100%, a padding of 20 pixels, making sure to spell padding correctly, a border of 1 pixel solid RGB 191, 191, 191. Let's do box sizing border box, border radius 20 pixels, font size 20 pixels as well, box shadow RGBA 149, 157, 165. 0.2, 0 x-axis 8 pixels, y-axis 24 pixels blur. Great, so that is the input, and now the button that lives inside the input container, in case you want to add any other buttons, it's going to have a position of absolute. I'm going to style it, so from the bottom of its parent, it's 38 pixels. From the right, it's 40 pixels. Let's get rid of the border. I'm going to do border none. The font size is going to be 40 pixels. The color is going to be RGB 140, 69, 167. Cool. And also I'm just going to add the background color because that's the color of the font, of course. I'm just going to make it transparent. So we've styled the button. I just want to add one tiny bit of styling, and that is what happens when we focus on the button. So focus, let's just change the color a little bit. So color, I'm going to do 663379. I have this picked out already. And then again, not when we're focused, but maybe when it's active. I'll change the color again, active, and change this to be 189, 27, and 253. Great. Let's also get rid of the focus of the input, so the blue line around it. So input focus, outline none. And I think that's it for now. I'm going to just go ahead because I already know that the messages container, so the container with all the messages, I want to pad that out by 30 pixels to match the input container, and also add a overflow Y, so on the Y axis of scroll. So we can scroll through messages if there's more of them and they don't fit in our app anymore vertically. I'm also going to style the message while we are here because this is super simple. I'm just going to make it padded out a bit. So I'm going to give it padding 20 pixels. Let's give it a border as well, right? So border 1 pix solid RGB 191, 191, 191. I feel pretty confident doing this. I'm going to give it the box sizing of border box as well. Let's round off the edges, so border radius 20 pixels. I'm going to change the font size to match the one in the input, so 20 pixels. Box shadow, well in fact I'm just going to take that from here as well, so it's the same. So there we go, and let's add a margin of 10 pixels at the top and bottom and 0 from the left and right. So great, we are now done with our styling completely. We're of course done with the layout. Let's just work on the page, the chat, and the message. So first off on the page, well, we have to import the chat we just made, right? So I'm going to uncomment this out and let's import it up here. Import chat from components chat. Okay, and this just means if we look in here, the chat shows up. You will see the input right here. Wonderful. So now that we've done that, let's work on the logic of actually communicating with our database next. So the page tsx file we can now get rid of. And in your chat tsx file, let's import the elegance client. So import elegance client from services elegance client. And we're of course setting the value here. We can define this as a string type, as only strings should be the value. We're also going to save the messages that we get back from our chatbot, right? So I'm going to do messages, set messages, use state. And this is actually going to take an array of strings. So let's do array of strings or undefined, as we're going to start off with it being undefined. Okay, so there we go. Now, I'm also going to find our table name that we have in our semantic search database. We know that it's called memories, right? That's what exists like on SingleStore. Now, in order to use the elegance client, well, we're just going to grab the elegance client like so, and we're going to use hooks from it. Today, I'm going to use the use search chat completion hook. And I'm going to save this as chat completion. So we can use all the wonderful methods and properties that come with it. This is essentially going to allow us to look in our database. And just like we did previously in the notebook, we're going to do a semantic search on our database so it returns something back to us, but also passes it through OpenAI and returns back something more readable this time. So it's like an extra step as well. All of that is done with just this one method, which is pretty amazing if you ask me. If you watch any of my other tutorials in which we communicate with database, we first have to, take the word that we search for. So for example, if we search for teaching, we then have to turn that into a vector embedding, and then we have to send that to the database to compare against the database to bring back the most similar item, and then we have to turn that into something readable by once again making a call to OpenAI. All of this is done with this one hook. So it's pretty amazing. I really think this is great. So now that we have done that, let's actually write our handle click function. So actually, if there's no value or there's no table name we can put, then we just return out of this, okay? Otherwise, let's continue. So let's do all there, sorry. And we're going to try and catch something. So try. Also going to catch error and just console error the error. So console the error, just like that. Great. Right, now what do we want to try? Well, we want to await the chat completion to execute, and then we're going to have to pass through an object into that. And then let's save this as the completion. So whatever comes back to us is the completion, just like so. So what we're going to send through is the collection. The collection is simply the table name, which we defined above. So that is one thing that we're going to pass through. Another thing we're going to have to pass through is the text field. So we're going to look in our memories table for the memory. We're also going to pass through the prompt. So for example, like the word teaching, and we're going to get that for the value, and we're going to trim it as well. Okay, the value is obviously what we save up here to state when we put it in the input. The embedding field, well, we're going to look in our table for embeddings. That's what we named it in our table. And then we're also just going to bring back something with a minimum similarity score. We're going to set that too. We're also going to define the max content length. So let's define that here. I'm going to set that as 3000. Okay. So there we go. Of course, we've used the await keyword here, so we need to make this async. It's an async function. And that should essentially do everything that I just said. So all the steps that I said previously I would have to do are going to be done here. We're going to get the word teaching. We're going to turn that into a vector embedding thanks to this function. This function is also going to look in our database for something similar. Return that back would also make it more readable like a human would. Wow, it's a lot. So let's just check this works first. I'm just going to console log completion. Okay, and if that exists, I'm going to get its context, as that does come back as an object, just a heads up. Okay, so that's all on the handle click button. While we are here, however, I'm just going to also define if it's disabled, because we've now defined chat completion. So if I can get chat completion, and if is loading, as that is a property that exists on it, then that's disabled. And we're also going to do the same for here. So we're going to check, we're going to disable it if the chat completion is loading, but also actually if there's no value. So if there's no value or chat completion is loading, we disable that button. Great. So we're just going to console log the completion out for now. Let's check this out. So once again, I'm just going to refresh this. Let's put teaching, as that is the example we've been using throughout teaching. I'm going to go into our database and ask it something, and it should return back the most similar item from our database. As it does, as a speaker at the Google event, I was able to share my experience in the field. Amazing. So it is bringing back the most similar item for us. This is fantastic. This is looking good. It's actually bringing back a few. Thank you so much for coming along with me. I'm so happy I got to show you that. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and really appreciate the ease of this SDK. So for now, I'm going to set messages, and I'm actually going to get all the previous messages. So we're just going to add this to the array. So prev messages, just like so. And I'm going to open up the array, spill out all the previous messages, just like that. And I'm going to put through the value, so the time we just searched, so for example, teaching, and then the completion context. So let's just get all of that like that. So once we have messages, we can map them onto here. So in fact, maybe let's just start fresh. So let's get the messages, and let's map each one. So let's get the message and the index. And then I'm going to get the message just like so. I'm going to pass through the key. We're just going to use the index of this for now. That is fine, as it will be unique. And then we're just going to pass through the message itself. Great. And of course, we have to import that in. So let's do that up here. Import message from message, as it's in the same place, and let's style this up. So here is our message. Once again, this is going to be very basic. We're just going to pass through the message. We can give it a type, so the message is going to be a string. And let's also define this as a JSX element. Okay, for this, we've already created a class name of message that we can add. So message, let's also add the closing div, and then we'll just pass through the whole message into here, like so. So now, once again, if I type teaching, hit enter, And of course, that shows the value here that I typed, as well as the response like so. We should probably flip this around. So instead, I think we should do value here. Okay, so once again, bring back a memory of mine about teaching. Send. And there we go. If you want a more fun, readable example, you should get the content. So content is the more readable version of the context that was provided, which is not a word-for-word example. It is what the LLM will spit back at us. So now let's try this again. Bring back a memory of mine about teaching. There we go. One memory that stands out to me about teaching is when I was invited to speak at the Google Developer event in London. So this is something that I did not write in here. You won't find that, okay, based on the context we fed in, as well as the most similar items ranging from most similar to least. That is a fun response that we got back from our chatbot or our LLM. Great. This is looking fantastic. I'm so happy with this. Thank you so much for coming along with me. I'm so happy I got to show you that. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and really appreciate the ease of this SDK.